Do bosses like Michael Scott actually exist? And if you work head for one, what's your craziest story? I had a boss sneak up behind a middle-aged female employee and pick her up, then immediately drop her down saying I didn't think you weighed that much. He could not stop laughing. He was the principal. This occurred during passing period in a crowded middle school hallway. I had a boss once who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch where he showed me a handmade graph. He then proceeded to explain that this was a chart of all the sex he had ever had in his life. See, here it is blank until I joined the army. Then I went to a hooker here. Then they sent me to Vietnam where hookers only charge $2 per time. That's where you see the big jump. I was on 2 tours but then got shot in the face. I came back home and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. My boss is certainly Michael Scott-esque. When I first started I was essentially Pam as well since I was both receptionist and his assistant to some extent. My favorite story was back when we were prepping for a conference. Some context, he's terrible with the English language in general and will mangle phrases and descriptions to no end how the turntables. So on a group call he kept talking about wanting a golden hamster ball to do giveaways with. Was raving about how great it would be spinning around while people walked by, all the while everyone on the call was just sitting in confused silence. However, by that point, I had become so good at decoding his nonsense that I knew he was referring to a gold raffle cage and sent him image privately asking if it's what he was thinking. To this day he still talks about the fact I can read his mind and must be psychic. And he still refers to it as a hamster ball. All in all, he's a pretty nice guy and a solid boss. Hired me based on a gut feeling and has been decent to me ever since. I think I knew it would be a good fit when during the interview he tried to tell me about the 4 pillars of the company and forgot one. Told me later it was knowledge. He wanted a pomegranate for lunch and they were out of season, but that didn't stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce guys laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 hour I've ever made. I used Michael Scott as a reference point for an old boss of mine from the moment I started working there. Maybe I could have gone home or to the movies etc. But driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did in fact check the gas station in Carbondale. They also do not carry pomegranates unless they're in season. He also told me a lot about an improv show he did for a full year after it happened. That said, he had all the good parts too. He never hesitated go to the mat for any of us whether we deserved it or not. He gave really sage business advice and great examples of how to face challenges out of absolutely nowhere. And he came to every community play I did in the 4 years I worked for him and told everyone else in the office how good I was in it for the following month and chastised them for not coming. When things really got serious or bad in my life, he couldn't have been more kind, helpful, and supportive. Honestly, probably the best boss I'll ever have. Had a boss who was very peculiar. For instance, he'd open a random closet, look at the stuff inside, then go on a tirade. Look at all this, who bought all this crap? You did. Oh. Well, somebody needs to throw it away. Constant stuff like this. I had a boss that used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see if I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder to cover the gap and she freaked. I still laugh when I think about it. I once worked for a family company, not my family, where my boss often had loud fights with her husband, mother, and sister, an addict with a penchant for stealing in the halls. I have a million wonderful stories about that workplace, but one that stuck out to me is this. Once for someone's birthday, she decided it would be fun to buy an anatomically correct male blow-up doll. She took this doll into the office, blew him up, and dressed him in a construction vest. The company was a contractor. When I walked by, my boss was trying to manipulate the position of the blow-up dick, and asked me if I wanted to be the fluffer. My ass boss insisted his daughters be flower girls in my wedding. I declined. At the reception, he told me I was spending too much time talking to one person, and I need to work the room more. He held a meeting with our whole team less one person to discuss said person being gay. We all knew for well over a year, and never made a deal of it. So yes, they are out there, and that is why the show is so funny to me. I can relate. I literally had a boss who would stop us in the middle of our work and hold company-wide meetings talking about 9/11 truth or conspiracies and chemtrails. Mind you, we were furniture-making company. He would get so caught up in his conspiracy theories that he forgot to order wood to make furniture one month. My brother had 2 bosses at his first job that I think fit this. It was an old married couple that owned the gym across the street from us. Probably in their 70s when he started working there. The wife was from Germany and super strict. The husband was clearly losing it. Some notable mentions are when the husband combined bleach and ammonia to clean the hot tub and sauna room, tear gassing my brother in the process. Wife insisted the street be swept once a week. This was my brother's task. Almost every single time, the husband would come out halfway through with a leaf blower and destroy any progress my brother had made. Husband would regularly sit in the sauna for way too long and have to be rescued by brother and co-workers. Brother opened every Saturday. They never gave him a key, so he would have to hop the fence to get in. There's so many more, but I know he's asleep right now and I can't ask him. Long ago, my 80-year-old boss pulled me into his office. B. Paul, I've noticed that your shirts come untucked and that looks unprofessional. Me, I'm sorry about that. Joel, B. I want you to start tucking your shirts into your underwear. Mia, B. Go ahead and try it now. Me, Joel, you know I have 15 women who report to me I can't undo my pants in the office. B. Sure you can. Drops pants. He is 80 and wearing Spider-Man underoos. This is also the story of how I went to work at Oak instead. I worked for a woman as her personal assistant cat sitter. She was super rich and off the deep end nuts. She had me order a mannequin online, and then paid me to take one of the mannequin legs to Nordstrom to try and see what suitcase I could buy that would fit the dismembered mannequin body, because she wanted to fly with the mannequin to Pittsburgh to display as her daughter, dressed in her daughter's clothes, at that daughter's graduation celebration. Buying the mannequin was a whole thing too. She kept trying to get me to order from adult doll websites because she didn't get it. Lamau worked with a genuine Michael Scott, i.e. a nice, well-meaning person who just did some absurd things. We had kidnapping drills one day, where we learned how to not be kidnapped. Notably, this was a regular, boring office in a regular, boring suburb. No reason why kidnapping would be on anybody's radar. He and several of the guys randomly broke out into a push-up contest. Again. White-collar office. Middle-aged dudes in khakis. Couldn't remember the nationality of our Hispanic colleague. Tried to learn Spanish to make her feel special when she returned from maternity leave. 1. What he learned was not Spanish, and 2. She was from Portugal. She knew like 5 words of Spanish. Disappeared for 4 days. No call. No email. Wouldn't respond to any of our attempts to reach him. Finally, someone drove out to his house to make sure he was alive. He was. He'd just forgotten to tell us he was taking the week off, and then lost his phone in a lake. There were many, many moments like these. Great boss, genuinely cared about everyone in the company. Occasional moments of brilliance, where he really got things done. But OMG, so many moments of ridiculousness. We had an anonymous feedback program at work, and our boss was livid with the results, particularly with several comments that he frequently lost his temper in meetings and would yell at us. The more he talked about how incorrect and unfair and hurtful these comments were, the redder and angrier he got, until he finally pounded the table and shouted, "I do not scream in meetings, okay? Mine had aspects of Michael Scott, but the ones that are sad and pathetic and not funny." A couple examples: he called an all-staff meeting to announce his divorce. He then instructed our receptionist to lie to his soon-to-be ex-wife and deny he was in the office, all the time. He was just so incompetent at his job. If a task was too big or complicated, he would just not do it. Wouldn't ask for help or anything, he'd just move on and leave whatever issue to fester. I would have to constantly monitor and follow up with him to get things done that affected my job. His writing read like he used a thesaurus heavily. Tons of superfluous words clearly put in there to make him sound smart. When he was terminated, he kept the corporate laptop and cell phone. After several strongly worded letters requesting their return, he drove back to the office, parked on the edge of the road, think busy rural highway, and made his teenage son carry it all across the yard and parking lot to deliver them. I was eventually tasked by the big bosses to coordinate his termination. They then gave me his job plus my previous one. I can do both within a 40 hours week, no problem. I had one for a year and it was awesome. If he would be in the middle of a story and the phone rang, he would literally say, "Let it go to voicemail." If a customer called 5 minutes before closing, he'd demand I let it ring and go to VM. He was late more often than I was. He frequently bought us coffees. He always took our side in customer disputes, and if a customer yelled at us or got abusive on the phone, he would call them back and get into an argument with them and tell them to order from someone else. He straight out told us that if weather conditions were bad, he didn't care how late we were, just that we were safe. Sometimes he would tell me on random days to take a 2-hour lunch. I was salary and didn't punch in or out. He was great and he gave me so much free stuff. We used to call him Michael Scott behind his back. Unfortunately, the owners were a bit stricter. Myself and another co-worker got fired and said boss got demoted. It was fun while it lasted. Edited to clarify, my boss did take our department and customers very seriously and was on top of the numbers. He just knew that happy, well taken care of employees are likely to produce more. We worked in a very stressful environment, so when we were able to take it easy a bit, he let us and often recommended it so we'd keep sane. Upper management were just slave drivers and hated that we laughed so much because they thought if you're having a good time at work, you obviously aren't being productive. I was very productive because my boss took care of me and made it fun to come to work. My mom's boss was the head manager at an office job in suburbia, pretty similar number of employees and function to the office in the show. He was in his late 40s at the time and invited himself to my mom's birthday party at our house one year. Basically was just my siblings and a few family friends meeting up to play cornhole and chat for a couple hours. He showed up in pastel blue shorts, a pink polo, and flip-flops with a case of natural light. He got hammered by like 9 p.m. and started yelling at everyone. He saw a couple of our neighbors' younger guys drinking next door and took the liberty to invite them over. Eventually he ended up in a wrestling match with one of the neighbors in the living room, which he finished by lifting the neighbor up in the air and body slamming him directly onto our coffee table. His final act of the evening was shitting his pants in the kitchen and passing out on the linoleum. While I never had a Michael Scott-type boss, I did have a Ron Swanson-type boss. He was completely no-nonsense and humorless and seemed like a real hard-ass at times. He spoke exclusively in abrupt, clipped sentences or downright abstained from speaking. Once he left the store for the day, he was completely unreachable by phone or email, and any mail for him arrived at the store or at his P.O. box. The store was in a strip mall and I'd regularly arrive at work to see him doing repairs to the entire structure, repaving or filling potholes in the parking lot. When the store was robbed and he was tied up by the criminals, he tried to stop them and was shot in the head. Luckily for him, it was a BB gun. Unluckily for the robbers, it made him angry. He broke the chair he was tied to but also broke his collarbone doing so, body checked one of the guys through a display case and then bit the other guy until he dropped the gun and they ran away. His name was Doug, last name withheld, and he was the best boss I ever had. Yes. They are everywhere. I've had a few. One would only approve your days off if you played into her ego. Her boring ass stories had to be the most fascinating thing you had ever heard. She would come into the office and spin around in a new outfit and we had to pretend it was amazing. I had to work every weekend for months until I started playing along, absolutely. Here are some gems from my previous boss. He hired a private investigator to follow his two around because he thought two was having sex with his wife. Thought I was having sex with his wife at one point, and had two follow me, then confronted me when he found out I had hugged his wife. She was the manager at a fast food place I worked before, and had gotten me the job at the plant. I was 18, she was 50. She was a mother figure. Loved to play this joke where he firmly insists I'm not going to get paid because I forgot to clock in or out. He would wait until he had me absolutely convinced and threatening to quit before he laughed and said he was just fooling to teach me a lesson. Used to play fire me for absolutely no reason other than his amusement. Would tell me to clean my hands so people didn't think I was black, because they don't employ black people. Even though computers are used everywhere now, he would still do all calculations by hand. It was a chemical plant, and he was calculating weights of ingredients using a 10-key calculator. He made mistakes often. And he would always blame the mistake on the person making that batch. I was a student, and he would threaten to fire me for missing work to take finals. He would lecture me on how if I wanted to be a successful man like him, I'd throw myself into my job and work my way up the ladder. I'm a first-gen college grad, and nearly quit school because of him, but I eventually just quit the job to go to school full-time, finished my BS, went on to grad school, and have been a professor at a pretty awesome school for 4 years now. Would order 6 burgers from McD's and a salad for lunch, then eat the burgers in his car, and the salad in the office, telling everyone he was on a diet. Dude was morbidly obese, writing it all out. Seems like it's all made up. I guess Michael Scott's character really isn't too far off from some of the craziness that makes its way up the ladder. I had one, and these are just a few quick stories. He asked me how much I weighed during my interview. One time he was considering selling the company to a Japanese company, and while walking them around the building he was heard saying, "We really bombed the hell out of you, huh?" He got on the intercom and interrupted everyone by yelling for someone to bring him the football team's schedule. I have video of him telling a really cringy joke during a sales meeting. You could see at least one person covering their face in embarrassment. One time he told me to call his assistant and have her bring him a bag of coffee and his 5 pounds dumbbell. He had a secret facelift. He was mysteriously gone for 3 weeks and came back with a beard. I ended up with a box of pictures from the 70s with an exotic dancer giving him a lap dance. In the conference room. Same furniture. One time I watched his business partner go down the potluck line, tasting everything with the same fork. At the end of the line, he stuck his used fork into the cake. I haven't eaten at a work buffet since. Honestly, these are just the ones I immediately remember. It was 5 years of this. Edit this seemed relevant. One time he got new patio furniture and sent the guys from the shipping department to put it together at his house. Orders did not go out that day. Edit 2. He had a huge closet where he'd hoard random shit. He was a total pack rat and his wife didn't let him keep junk at home. I was looking for something one day and found a box labeled watches with dead batteries. He saved an entire box of watches that he knew didn't currently work, and also knew how to fix that. But instead, he just kept them in a box.